so many people go through a breakup and then they're looking at, how do I move on? How do I heal? You are still attached to this person that you were dating initially after a breakup. There's still an attachment there. And the reason is because you haven't yet grown. You haven't expanded. So of course, your consciousness is still attracted to the person you were with. As you grow, as you heal, as you do that work, your consciousness, the amount of patterns that you see, what you want, all of that stuff starts to shift. And now you, in your new place, would never actually date that person who couldn't meet you in what you want. People always worry, well, what if I want to get back together? Well, the new version of you has to meet the new version of them.
Right.
And then there's an opportunity. But how you move on is by doing that growth, so that you actually wouldn't even be attracted to that version. You wouldn't even be a match anymore. And naturally, suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I can let that go. And so the process of releasing, like keeping the lessons, but releasing the baggage and the hurt, I had to learn through several breakups. Breakups have been a huge part of my journey. I mean, if you think about it, the last time we spoke was in Egypt, and now we're here in an empty, gigantic studio. With like LEDs and different things.
Are LEDs.
It's like
the
you and I
LED.
haven't had just like a normal, which is.
And even in Egypt, it was like the first time first time we met.
Yeah, you said that we were at Burning Man camp, like the same camp for a dance party experience,
That's right.
but we didn't
2 years
actually say
ago.
hi.
That was KISS, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was KISS.
Yeah.
And then I was at KISS camp this past year.
Yeah, I was supposed to be.
Okay.
I was supposed to be,
Are you
and
gonna
then
do
I
it this
pulled
year?
out. But that's the plan.
Okay.
That's the plan. But I'm at that stage where I really want to find a long-term home. You know, I've been traveling for 6 years.
Oh,
so.
like permanent. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to, and so I'm not. It's very easy to fill up the calendar with continuous travel.
Totally, and then that kind of doesn't matter if you live anywhere because you're like, oh, well, I'll wait because I've got this trip and then that trip.
And it keeps getting pushed. It's like, well, I'm not going to find a place because then I'm only going to be there 2 weeks and then I'm traveling again. And so, I mean, I leave tomorrow for LA and then 4 days and then I'm in Lisbon for 2 weeks and then I'm in Miami for a week. And so it's like that. And it's been that way for about 6 years now.
Where do you live?
I don't have a home base.
At all?
Yeah, I haven't had a lease in 6 years. I've been fully nomadic for 6 years. Yeah, and so you can imagine
Are you living out of bags?
I travel with a guitar, a backpack, and a suitcase. That's what I travel
Wow.
with.
I mean, this is someone's dream though too.
The grass is always greener,
Yeah.
though. I think that it's amazing because I had to learn, I was a very regimented person in terms of needing safety, security, routine. And then this journey of the last 6 years has been a full surrender. It's just, let me put my sail into the wind and let kind of spirit guide me. And I have the opportunity for someone to say, hey, come to Egypt. I go, sure, why not? It's the same as anywhere else. And, but now after doing that for 6 years, my actual growth is in committing. I've been exploring commitment.
Was that after the breakup then? Because you had a traumatic breakup. You were with someone for 10 years. Was it on the heels of that you've been basically nomadic since?
Yes, good job. Yeah.
So you've been on like a vision quest, hero's journey for a while now. Instead of doing it at 14 like the Native Americans or any other old indigenous sort of tribes, like you've kind of done that.
But it does also feel like it was a rite of passage. It does feel as if I became a man in those 6 years where the safety net of a 10-year relationship, from 23 to 33, I was in that relationship. So in many ways, my association of who I was entirely developed, and my masculinity developed in relation to another person.
Totally.
And so when that was removed, suddenly it was, I'm 40-year-old virgin. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what to do. Dating profiles, trying to set those up.
You need a matchmaker. You gotta have the guy that comes in, the suave guy to show you all the. I don't think you needed that, but those are always good movies.
Hitch.
Yeah,
right?
Hitch is one of them.
I needed one of those. I definitely did, for sure.
Has it been fun though?
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been incredible. And I think you learn so much about yourself when you remove the routines and so everything that I built in the last 6 years around my brand and business and finding myself as an artist even more, all of that happened without routine and stability. And so now I'm excited because taking all of that and grounding in and putting in roots, I feel the expansion that's possible when I have that stability. That's my word for the year, is stability.
Okay.
Do you have a word?
I do, and I was literally, as you said it, I'm like, what's my word? And I was like, my word is allow.
Allow.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of flow, which feels just kind of like passive, allow feels like, more active to me. to allow just people to be who they are, things to happen, things to change.
How do you dance between that? Because surrender is something that in sort of my community, people always say like surrender, surrender. And for me, surrender is an action. People think of surrender as giving up, but surrender is actually an act of trust because you're surrendering into something. And you're saying, I trust whatever that is, whether it's God or spirit, the universe, whatever, you are surrendering to that. And so it's an action of trust. And so I think there's this balance of surrender versus like implementing your will of what you actually want. And I'm curious, with someone, you've achieved so much, where do you fall in that balance of surrender and implement your will?
Well, I used to have a saying that was try harder. I won't go into the story, but try harder was what I said, and my friends all knew it. My friends said it, but that's like a lot of forcing. And so I think there's a certain amount of that you need. You need a certain amount of try harder because not everything's just easy. I don't think it's not supposed to be. But you have to, and I think this is where the development of spirituality really comes into play, where you start to identify sort of synchronicities and little nuanced things that happen that are signs or signals of what to do, what not to do, where to go. Even being able to hear your own inner voice or higher self or God or whatever you want to call it. Like you've got to be pretty in tune with yourself to hear that and then to notice the little things that go on. So always try harder and then notice when you just keep hitting your head against the wall over and over and you're like, or when things just aren't going really smoothly or well, or taking a long time, to sort of at that point then step back and go, I'm going to just allow this to be what it is. I'm going to allow a total pivot. I'm going to allow that person to be who they are. I'm going to allow this relationship to go. I'm going to allow whatever it is. But I think that there has to be a dance. Like that is, I feel like the theme of being a human is there's just this dance between effort and like in yoga, right? You got to stretch. You can't just like flop down on the ground. But also you can stretch, but then you can kind of get a little active with it, but then you got to let go to release a little further. Or even with the masculine feminine, it's this dance of like try but allow in that even. And so this is this polarity of being a human.
I agree. Do you feel you always had that, even at the height of racing, for example, or at that time were you very much more forcing your will?
Totally. Yeah, always very, very forced, very effort. Until probably, 2015 was when more of my spiritual journey got going, which allowed me to be able to kind of I also identify the difference between quitting and letting go of my career. I was like, I let that go. Like I surrendered or I allowed or whatever, I flowed. Like I let that go. When did you get into spirituality? Has this always been a part of your life? Were your family into it?
2013 was when I found spirituality.
Okay.
It was, and I know that because I sat ayahuasca in January of 2013.
Oh wow, you jumped in like you didn't play.
No, I was raised Catholic. So my dad's from the Philippines, and he immigrated to the United States, and I grew up in a Filipino Catholic church community, and I was an altar boy. And so the Filipino Catholic Church is, every weekend you're doing events together and potlucks, and like this is the community. And so I grew up in that. But what I found, I just never found a connection to God through religion. I just didn't. It seemed as if it was a chore. It seemed as if it was a responsibility. The people that I was around I didn't look up to them necessarily. They didn't seem to be super happy. There didn't seem to be answers there. And so I tried. I actually really did try. Even in high school, I joined FCA, which was the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It was a club, and we would read the Bible every week and have pizza. We'd have pizza and read the Bible.
Was that fun, or were you like, I'm trying?
I believed that, and this is something that I still believe today, is I want experience in order to create my belief patterns. I think a lot of people just adopt beliefs of what they've been told or what they see in media or their people around them, but it's not because they've had an experience of it. When I think of, for example, racism in the world, right? Racism, for me, most people don't have this experience that causes them to go, I don't like this group of humans. They've adopted it because of the beliefs of their parents or their surroundings. And I just believe for myself, I want an experience so that I actually stand behind what it is I believe. And so I didn't ever have the experience of feeling God through religion. And so I tried, and I went, well, it's just not there, and therefore I don't believe. And I went very scientific, and I went, okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then in 2012, I had the most difficult year of my life at the time. Everything that I had associated to my identity, my career, I was an actor in Los Angeles, and my financial situation, my health, I got into 2 car accidents, and I needed surgery, I had concussion, just all of these things. And out of pure desperation, I reached out to the only spiritual friend that I knew who, that just meant he meditated. And I said, hey, I need help. I need aura cleansing or something. I just need something, please. And he said, I know who you need to talk to. You need to talk to this intuitive, which means psychic, basically, right? And this woman said to me, we got on the phone call 3 months later. And on that call, she was talking to me, telling me all these things about my ancestors and whatever. I don't remember any of it. But she stopped in the middle of what she was saying, and she said, I don't know why, but they're telling me you need to get into a Native American sweat lodge or drum circle as soon as possible. And then she just started talking again. And it was so different. There was just a frequency difference to what she said. That's the one thing that I still to this day remember about that conversation, which was 3 hours long. And I thought, I don't know how to do that, but I'd heard about this thing called ayahuasca just like a week earlier. And I heard there was a shaman. I heard you sat in a circle, so sure. And I sat on Friday and Saturday night, 2 nights back to back. And from that one weekend, completely found my connection to spirituality.
Wow. Well, this is another duality of like the head and the heart, right? This dance that we do there too, because I find the same thing, and I'm curious. I've been thinking about things that are somewhat ineffable or unprovable, and they all land in the emotion kind of category. Like one of the questions I want to ask you was, what is love? And like this is, such a question. You can't prove it. There's no you can't prove this out. This isn't scientific. It's just something we feel. But this sort of, again, dance that we do, where religion for many could be something learned. It's in a book. It's in your head, but there hasn't been something experiential. And that's the magic of plant medicine, is that it's like a hyper deep dive into an experience that becomes embodied, because when you embody it, now it's just like an isness to you. It's kind of, you don't even need to say anything anymore. It kind of just is part of your being, and it's through the full physical experience that, in my opinion, with plant medicine, because you're truly in it, you're in those spaces, and it's fully embodied, and now it's just a truth for you. So like spirituality in that experience became just a truth for you because it was, your whole body was infiltrated. Like you experienced it with your mind, but also physically with your body. And that's what I find to be super powerful about plant medicine. And you just told a story about how you went from religion being in the mind to plant medicine being in the body. Very different experiences. And
one of the things for me that was about it was I had these experiences in the ceremony that I saw things, heard things that I then confirmed outside of ceremony.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And so I had a couple of those where I actually went, my logical mind said, it's actually now more illogical to think that all of this is a giant coincidence, as opposed to there's some other force at play that you can't see or didn't believe in, but there's something that's creating these connection points that is ineffable. It is something there. And that's actually more logical for me to believe based on how many coincidences happened. That like, how would I know exactly what this person said, 30 miles away from where I was at that exact moment, what they were doing? So I think that we have this idea of what a miracle is, or spiritual, and it's so rare, like this miracle, but that's not true. There are miracles happening every second, all across the globe, all the time.
That's exactly
miracles are the most common thing on the planet. They're happening
all the time.
All the time. They just don't happen to you in every single moment necessarily, right?
Yeah, every single time. Right?
Every single time. But if you were to gather, 100,000 people, which is a tiny percentage of the actual human population, there's probably a miracle every day amongst those 100,000 where people go, I can't even believe that. And so it's actually so common. And so this idea of what is a miracle, what do we need, and anyone listening is, what do you need in order for you to believe in that thing, whatever that thing is, what is it that you need to believe, and how do you put yourself in a position to at least experience it? Because I do think that what you're seeking is seeking you.
Absolutely.
And so if you just have that intention, I want to develop a deeper connection with myself, the universe is going to give it to you. So with manifestation, a lot of people ask me about manifestation because I've had some pretty crazy manifestations in my life.
Yeah.
And
you're making $1 million or $2 million essentially in 2 days or 3 days. It's
you listen to that story. Yeah. So for people who don't know that story, I was in a ceremony and I was told that it was now $1 million to work with me as a coach, because I've been a life coach since 2013, and it's now $1 million to work with me. And I said, okay, and then it will be $1 million by the end of the week. You'll have your first $1 million client by the end of the week. 5 days later, I had $1 million transferred to me, all in upfront in one lump sum for a 1-year coaching contract. And so examples like that are pretty wild. Most people go, there's no way.
Yeah.
And so
I thought it was more wild that you had 2 people that were willing to do that, but your message was one person and you turned someone down.
Yes.
That was more amazing, I thought. I was like, I'm not sure that would have been my advice if I was counseling you.
two people said yes to coach with me for $1 million, and then while I was meditating, I received the message, it's only supposed to be one, and I wrote to the first person, I said, I'm really sorry, I have to remove the offer. And but that's the level of, I believe, so my spirituality works in a way where I believe in sacred contracts.
Okay.
I believe that I have agreements with my higher self, God, spirit, and my role is to let spirit know, hey, this is what I'd like to experience. This is what I'd like to see. Here's some of my dreams and my visions. I trust you to design it. And the way that I can be guided is to stay in integrity. That's how, whatever that agreement is. So one of them, for example, is I never lie. I absolutely, doesn't matter what it is, I will not tell a lie, because I believe what that does is it allows spirit to bring people into my experience, and if they ask me questions, I can be a messenger for whatever that my truth is and be used like a pawn in the game. Like if I know that what your truth is, imagine I can read into your mind and I know that's your truth, and I know that this person over here needs to hear that message, I can make sure that that person asks you that question, because you will never tell a lie, you will always tell your truth. And when we're out of integrity, think about like this glass right here. The integrity of this glass is compromised when there's a crack in it, and it can no longer hold the same amount of pressure or the same amount of contents, the same amount of energy that it can when the integrity is intact. And I believe we're the same. I believe the amount of energy that can flow through us from wherever is based off of the integrity that we hold as humans, energetically.
That's, I'm just thinking about that in my own life, never lying. Wow, that's and I'm not a liar at all. Like, I'm a truth teller for sure, but do you have any stories where it didn't go so well, or like where it was a little shocking, or is this mostly just in sort of like your business life and talk and coaching? Is this like, if, in every situation?
My last relationship,
no white lies, just to like avoid.
She said, do you think we're going to be together forever? Like that kind of thing. And the non-confrontational aspect of me as the masculine, just wanting, I know what she's seeking, and I'm suddenly going,
validation.
I can't say that.
And you had to break up. You had to break up, right?
We did eventually break up.
Like how much later?
We wound up, she wanted that at the 3-ish month mark.
Okay.
And we ended up staying together for a little over a year.
Okay.
But it created such an instability in her.
Interesting.
For our entire relationship, there was a deep fear and doubt in her because I wasn't willing to say that.
Right.
And so it creates some things.
There's a very like, because I've asked this sort of thing of people too, and but I'm not always asking for them to be like, can you for sure tell me this is the case for you? It's more like, is that your intention? So I think there can be a slight difference between like, do you think we'll be together forever? And my answer would be like, that is absolutely my intention. As of right now, yes. That is my intention, and I have no idea how it's going to go.
Yeah, I hope so. I think my answer was, I really hope so. That's what I'm working towards.
So you didn't say no then?
Well, that wouldn't be honest either.
Right, that's true.
Right?
I don't know.
Yeah. I say, I want that.
Yeah.
I'm working towards that. That's why I'm here. That's what all of this is for. But I also can't tell you that. And then obviously if I were to get married one day, whenever that is, I would make a commitment, as my commitment is, and whatever my vows are would be my truth. Right? Like that's where I don't know what marriage means to everyone, but whatever my vows are that I write will be 100% my truth. And that is whether that's I am committing to building this life with you and giving you everything I possibly have until the day I die. Great. I just need to know that that's true for me in order to be able to say it. Right?
What do you want? When you think about a relationship with someone, what do you want?
I want family and kids and the whole, I want to have like a bunch of kids. I used to think it was just 1 or 2, but now I'm entertaining 4 and just having like a whole tribe. Like I think
you just
about
weeded a few out, I think. Right then. I'm just kidding.
Well, I just love the idea of building a family.
Yeah.
Really building a family and having a partner where we are creating this. I mean, think about your best friends. And I think about my best friends. Being around them is the best. I have such a good time all the time. And I just would love for that to be my family. I would love for that
every
to
day,
be
best friends all around.
just around, just cracking up with them and celebrating with them. And I expect myself to be the kind of dad that is teaching them how to swim and ride bikes and coaching the soccer team. I want to be heavily involved. I'm going to take my poetry and write children's books, sort of like a Shel Silverstein or Dr. Seuss style.
Relationships are hard. Maybe I'll start there. Let's reverse.
Agreed.
And they're hard because they show us, in my opinion, and which is not always easy to see. It's not easy to see, and it's not loved to see at times. So what's the point of relationships then? We'll start there.
Growth.
Okay.
I believe that the point of a relationship is to let someone into these areas of yourself that no one else has access to. And as a result, that person having access to that becomes a mirror for areas that no one else can reflect to you. And so you have this opportunity to, it's so vulnerable because you are literally and figuratively showing up naked.
Yeah.
You are showing up and saying, these are the deepest parts of me
Yeah.
that literally no one else in my life gets access to. And that is a level of vulnerability because I know that those parts that you now have access to, you could reject, you could judge, you could shame me for, you could, all of these things. And, but allowing love, so you asked, what is love, right? For me, love is the expansive force of the universe. Love is, when we feel love in our system, everyone agrees it's a feeling of expansion. There's like a effervescent sort of thing, like helium that's happening in our bodies. And when we feel fear, we feel the contraction that happens. That experience to me is a sign that all we need is to allow love in, and love will do the expansion. We don't expand ourselves. We just let love into the area we previously were too scared to let it into. And love does what love does, and it expands us. And so when I say to you, I need to share with you one of my deepest insecurities, I am in that moment saying, this part of me that I have judged, this part of me that I've hidden away, I love myself enough to be willing to face the rejection. I love you enough to give you my trust and put my heart on display for you. And that act of exchanging love allows the light of consciousness, of awareness, into a space that previously was closed, and it will expand. And so that to me is the purpose of love, and why love in romantic context, what its purpose is to allow us to expand in ways nothing else can.
Yeah. But we want to run. So what is a lot of times, right? I mean, not all the time, but, and then you have, again, that sort of polarity of, like, usually the kind of people that attract each other tend to be like an avoidant and an anxious to show each other what's really going on with the other. So then the next logical question is, what skill set, experiences, and like tricks to life do you need so that you can navigate when you see yourself, or when the mirror is held up and you don't like it, or you feel like or it requires change, or a compromise or adaptation, whatever it is, what skills do you need to be able to actually be in the relationship to grow?
So awareness gives us choice. So the first step of anything that you want to change has to start with awareness, and there has to be an ability to be aware of it. And so this is my perspective on masculine and feminine that I think is
so fascinated by this.
I think it's one of the most misunderstood aspects of masculine and feminine. So hopefully this is something that resonates with you, which is, so the feminine is connected to the void space. I've spoken about this a lot, which you have a womb, and so that is the place where souls come from. There's an infinite, chaotic aspect of the world between life and death that literally women bring souls from wherever they come from through their bodies. And so there's a connection point to that infinite void space that men, we just don't have, right? And so as a result to that connection, you have a connection to the infinite, and it's why women throughout history have been the oracles. They've been the oracles that have been used in that high priestess way as a way of seers of what's possible. And as a result, the feminine will always want more. And it's this thing.
I don't know what you mean.
There's more intimacy, more connection, more love, more pleasure, more whatever. There's always a feeling that more is available.
Yes.
And so that part of you that feels that is perfect, because the design of the masculine is to fill every potential space that the feminine gives us. We literally are predisposed to want to provide. Is what makes us feel masculine. And so most men on the planet, if their woman comes to them and says, I want this, the first instinct is actually, I'd like to give it to them. Yeah. The second instinct, though, is the greatest karmic wound of the masculine, which is, we are not enough. And that moment of, what if I can't give it to her? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I'm not smart enough? What if I fall on my face? I won't be enough. And I just gave her more adventure, and now she's asking for more intimacy. It's never gonna be enough. I'm not enough. And so we are faced with the deepest karmic wound that we experience as men. And by the way, we all have masculine and feminine energy in us. So therefore, you also experience the I'm not enoughness too, that generates generally from that masculine wanting to prove that we are. And so then, in that moment of faced with the deep karmic wound of I'm not enough, the only way out is through. So we have to overcome that part of us that doesn't feel enough to actually elevate ourselves to become the man that is able to meet you in what you've just said you need or want. And in the moment that you feel met, and that man has actually has met you in the possibility that you saw, you feel met, you feel safe, you feel secure, and the feminine in that safety has the yin energy of expansion. Right? I'm not rejected, I'm this. And in that expansion, suddenly you become aware of more. Because now you can feel the more that's available. Now you gotta deal with
more again.
And so then you have to overcome your deepest karmic wound of the feminine, which is you are too much. This fear that if you let all of your desires be known, all of your emotions,
I'm pretty sure I have both.
Yes, we all have both inside of us. And so in that moment, you have to overcome the part of you that's gonna fear being rejected, that fears being greedy or selfish, and say, okay, I'm worth this, I'm willing to own this, I'm willing to face the rejection and voice what it is that I want, and then that dance continues. And that this is why, by the way, archetypally, women will dim their light and men will try and overcompensate. This is the dance of the masculine and feminine, and why I'm bringing it to this is because when you ask, what is it that people need? As a woman, it's important for you to know you will always want more, and make sure that you're aware that it doesn't mean you're not being met or being given what you want. And when you voice it to me, you have to know that it will trigger the part of me that doesn't feel enough. And I have to be aware that even you voicing it to me is not because you're unhappy or whatever. You're voicing it to me because there's a potential you see for me and us as an oracle that is going to allow me to elevate. And I know that you had to overcome a deep fear just to voice it to me. And so that sensitivity to the journey that we're on together in union, when you can have awareness of that, you suddenly communicate differently. And that's a starting point. From there, you need tools and modalities and et cetera.
Yeah, that was so beautifully put and hits so hard. And I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, okay, so if you can meet them there at these wounds, then what happens when the next thing comes up? But you're saying those are essentially the foundation of what creates the most amount of conflict, right?
Well, also because the edges of your consciousness are held in place by all your fears, doubts, insecurities, and that part of you. Because if you think about it, remove all your fears, all your doubts, remove all of it, including the belief of separation, all of that, and you're back into oneness. And so just that you and me to have our own consciousness requires some level of belief, even in separation or like individuality or whatever. And from there we add on, oh, this is how tall I am. This is what I believe about life. All of these things and all the fears, doubts, insecurities and are what hold us in place. And that's why whenever we have an expansion, we generally have walked through a place where we'd previously been limiting ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's the design. When you said, what is the point of relationship? For me, the point of relationship is this expansion. We are here to expand each other and go on this journey to become as much of who we can become. And that will require us to walk through our fears, doubts, and insecurities and limiting beliefs. And so you are going to trigger that. And you have to be able to trigger the deepest ones. Otherwise, where would those get triggered? And if they don't get triggered, then how could we ever have awareness of them? And if we don't have awareness of them, how could we ever grow beyond them? There would be a natural limitation to what we could become, and I don't believe in that. And so you are going to trigger the deepest parts of me in relationship. That's just the design of it. Instead of thinking there's something wrong, we embrace the design, and that changes everything.
So someone needs to be fully aware. Each person needs to be fully aware that they will be triggered. And more importantly, that their goal is growth. Would you say that's the case?
Yes, I believe that you getting into relationship, you accept that there will be triggers and they will be deep and they will be things that you generally don't want to look at and very painful and very hard. And now the next step, once you've accepted that, because if you don't accept that premise, the moment that it happens, you make a decision that this is wrong. This is the wrong relationship. If it was the right relationship, I wouldn't be triggered in this way.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of what I'm getting to is like that can be a very sticky place where people get to where it's like, it makes me wonder like how much is enough to deal with in the name of love?
I mean, that's a really good question. That's a very, very tricky one. And I think that my personal belief around that is I give everything I have until I can't. Try harder. I try harder, and there's a certain point where I know, like, I just don't have anything more to give. And I think one of the biggest ones is when there's resentment.
Yeah, that's probably one of the 4 horsemen from Gottman, I think, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
Contentment with each other.
Yeah, if I am now resenting you, it doesn't matter what you do. I'm looking at you through a lens of, I'm like looking for the things to be upset about. And at the next stage, so for people to have a practical, okay, you just got some awareness from this podcast or whatever of what the design could be. The next stage is you have to learn how to regulate your nervous system and co-regulate your nervous systems.
Tricks? Share.
Well, so understand that when we get into a triggered state, what happens is that the blood flow reduces from your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that has rational thought. And suddenly it flows to your amygdala and your limbic, which is your instincts. It's your fight or flight response. And so what happens is we get triggered, we're in an argument, and we're trying to convince the other person of how we see it.
Of course.
But they literally, physiologically, don't have the capacity in their mind. Their brain is not in a place where they can even rationally understand your point or receive it. And so now we're just beating our heads against the wall.
Yeah.
And so understanding some things like one of the most important ones is breathing. Really a parasympathetic breath. There's a lot of them. You can do box breathing, which is inhale for 6, hold for 6, exhale for 6, hold for 6. You can do 4-7-8, which is inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. You do like 6 or 7 of those breaths, and it physiologically, it doesn't matter how upset you are, it will change your state because you're not able to do that while you're running from a tiger.
Right.
So biologically, if we're
shifting
actually in fight or flight, we can't breathe like that. And so the fact that you can breathe like that tells your body, oh, we're not running from a tiger.
We touched on ayahuasca a little bit at the beginning, but I want to get a little bit more into plant medicine. I just think that it's from those who have experienced it. It's, I think I love to hear someone speak to it and their opinion and their stories. But I think it's such a powerful tool. And we were talking about these, ley lines meeting up to make these energetic portals or powerful places. But to me, like, open up your own with them. And it's sort of like you can kind of force getting into that space a little bit. So what your first ayahuasca experience was super big, obviously. You had mentioned Iboga before we started talking before we were rolling. And
when we were in the empty room by ourselves, we were in the void.
No, we're in a library. So this is my library. So what about Iboga? Because I haven't done that one. I've done quite a few, but I haven't done that one. So what was that, like your next most powerful experience, would you say?
Well, I'll tell you about that. But first I have a question for you, which is, have you received a lot of angry people pushback at all around talking about this so openly? No.
Like not at all.
Really?
Like it's crazy because I was so afraid as being an athlete, essentially, where it's like you get drug tested and like you don't even really you don't want to be drunk in front of people even, like you just kind of walk the line of this sort of my body's a temple athlete. And then I remember when I first started talking about it and I just sort of casually mentioned it in an interview, and there was nothing negative has ever come from it. I mean, I feel so grateful for that, but maybe it's because there's a place in people's hearts and minds where they're open in some ways and receptive to this channel. Now, if I talked about recreationally using it, it'd probably be a little bit more judged. And look, I do. To some degree, I use a little bit like mushrooms and things like that. You can go watch a concert. Like, you haven't lived until you've done that. That's fantastic. But the real purposeful journeys, I've done ayahuasca and psilocybin and, I've done some MDMA therapy and various different things. But yeah, no pushback.
Interesting. That surprises me.
I agree.
I would have thought you would have received a lot. So, Iboga, so I have a lot of medicine experience in a lot of different ways. I used to be also, I was just that guy back in high school and college too that said, I'll try anything twice.
Mine is when in doubt, double the dose. So
there you go. We were similar to try harder.
Try harder. The only thing worse than not taking enough is taking too much though. So, there's that.
There you go. I think, the process for me of
probably going to get in trouble for that one though.
Iboga is a tree from a specific region of Africa, Gabon, and it is one of the oldest. I mean, it has lineage traced all the way back to Egypt, where one of the pharaohs in Egypt actually brought the Bwiti tribe, went down, brought the Bwiti tribe up to Egypt and learned about it. And so there's what they wore, actually you can see similarities between the Bwiti and the Egyptians. And so anyway, the root of it is kind of shaven down and you get these wood shavings. And there's 3 ways that people are familiar with Iboga and can take it. The wood shaving is traditional, where you just are eating a bunch of this wood shavings, basically.
Oh, that sounds
and it's very challenging, but that's like traditionally done. Now you can synthesize it into what's called a total alkaloid, which is basically a pill with a crystal that's been synthesized so that all the alkaloids, all the properties of the wood shavings are in a synthesized form.
So it's natural, it's not synthetic, but it's been manipulated, essentially.
Yeah, and then you have what a lot of people have heard about actually, which is ibogaine. And ibogaine is one alkaloid from Iboga. And ibogaine is most commonly known for treating addiction. Yeah, and so
I didn't know Iboga and ibogaine are different.
It's one. Ibogaine is an alkaloid within the wood, and it's brought all the way out, so it's just this one alkaloid is now ibogaine.
Is that because that's the only effective one?
It's because of how it specifically works with like the receptors in the brain or whatever, specifically for treating addiction. And so you get a lot of ibogaine treatment centers, and I believe they legalized it in New York, or because they had such an opiate problem that it's the effectiveness of it in treating opiate addiction and alcohol addiction relative to what else is out there is incredibly high. And so the reason for that is because it really floods your brain. And I'm not a scientist. I just want to make sure everyone knows I am someone who has done it. And I have researched a bit, but I am not a scientist. I'm not a doctor.
Fair.
And for me, I did it for the first time in 2018, I believe. And it was such an intense experience that I went to heal the sexual abuse. Like, it was a really big part of what I was working on at the time, because it had become, I remembered it. And so it floods the brain with growth factor and makes your brain neuroplastic. So for the most part, we don't have that level of neuroplasticity after the age of about 7. And so it's like wiping an Etch-a-Sketch. And so you have the ability to reinforce new behavior patterns. That's why it's really effective at treating addiction. And for me, at the time, I wanted to wipe, obviously, the way I'd been. And then 6 years later, I went back right before we went to Egypt. And I sat 2 ceremonies. And what people should know about this, which is important, is the ceremonies last basically 48 to 72 hours. You are in bed for up to like 48 hours, and then you're kind of a zombie for the next.
Is there any food? Because most of the time with plant medicine, it's very limited before, and then none right before and during. So when we're talking about 2 to 3 days, is there actually food that happens?
Yeah, so it depends on how deep you are. You know, it might be just drinking a little bit of coconut or having a little mango or whatever. The first ceremony that I did, I was actually pretty good at the 48-hour mark. I was moving around and I was eating. And then the next one, it was beyond 72 hours where I still felt, you've done ayahuasca, so that next morning you're kind of just zoning out, but you're present and you're, right? Sometimes that...
You're in a floating phase.
72 hours after I took the medicine, I was still in that floating phase. And so with Iboga specifically, what I was told by the shaman that I did it with the first time 6 years ago was, try not to make so much meaning about it, the way that a lot of people do with ayahuasca. Is like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what it means.
Here's my intention, and this is my...
Because of how it works on the brain and everything, just trust that in 6 months, you'll look back on life and it'll be very different. And you know, what's wild, actually I'm just putting together in this moment, is my first trip to Egypt was within 3 months of my first Iboga journey. And this last trip to Egypt was within a week. And so they've been linked.
You had just done Iboga the week before we went? In December?
Oh yeah, I flew from that retreat. I did a week of it. I left the retreat, spent 1 night in a hotel, and then flew to Egypt the next day. When you saw me, I had sat 2 Iboga journeys back to back the week before.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you see in them? Because I mean, I've experienced some of the other ones, and some people talk about seeing entities, and for me, my experience is always very human-based. But it's like, they all have their own little nuanced differences. I felt like ayahuasca showed me more of like future potentials. Psilocybin is a little bit more like nature of reality and like what's really going on. I wonder what the difference is for you, and then specifically with Iboga.
I mean, with Iboga, it's unlike any. You say, was it like this? It's its own thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's its own thing. But also, the way it's described is you move beyond the veil. You go into the spirit world, and so it's facilitated differently. But the one that I experienced this recent time is they take you on a journey. They say, "We'll journey you," and the shaman comes behind you, and you've come with a list of questions that you've worked together to. So I have like 15 questions, and then you go into the spirit world, guided by the shaman. You say, "Okay, so now we're going to go to the moon, or we're going to go to the sun, or we're going to go to these entities," and you are going to, and then when we get there, tell me when you see them. And you're like, it's a very visual experience. Eyes closed, you have a sleeping mask on, and you're there, and then you ask these questions, and you get very clear answers.
And fast?
And very fast, yeah.
That was how it was for me, for sure, on mushrooms, for sure.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, it's overwhelming. Question, answer almost simultaneously.
Well, what's interesting is that it's always so simple.
It's
the
sim-
answers are always simple, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're not these complex things. I asked one of them, how can I have a better relationship with commitment?
Try harder.
The answer was commit.
Exactly,
That
right?
was the answer.
It
Just
is
that.
so simple,
It's
but
so
we're
simple.
such meaning-making machines, and we're also trying to justify our behavior in various different ways, the way that we try and manipulate situations as a human. But I also felt like in the experience, I don't know if this was the way for you, but being a human was a break. To me, that was the message. Like, when I opened my eyes for a second, it was like, this was on psilocybin, I was like, oh my God, this is a break. Like, I can stop the like constant back and forth and question and answer and information. And when I go into it, it's just overwhelming again. I'm back in it, and there's so much. It's like I'm taking on, 400 times the amount of data that I am in the human realm. So being a human is a break.
Do you feel busy? Like every day, I'm curious because I look at you as someone who hit a level of success that few people touch ever in their lives. And you hit that point, and now you're a very ambitious, and like you seem like a very driven woman. And I'm
This
just
is
curious.
me calm.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, do you feel really busy? Do you feel mentally, emotionally like at your capacity right now with what you're doing, or?
Yeah, generally.
Yeah?
I would say I've gotten to that point again. And I would say that the one thing that adds the most to it is probably podcasts, just because there's no too much. There can be, I guess, but there's really, like, when I'm taking on guests, number one, I like to challenge myself and be uncomfortable, so that already is a bad starting point. But number two is that, like, you can always take in information. So I end up feeling like there's this underlying sort of tension about, like, you should be researching, you should be studying, you should find out more. So I have to, like, give myself permission, like, okay, I know this is coming up in 2 weeks, but I don't need to start for at least another week, and just chill out. Everything is fine. You'll be ready. So I guess I feel like at the end of last year, between all the podcasts I was doing, which was every week that I wasn't doing a Formula One race, which was a whole bunch at the end of the year, F1, I had to think a lot because you're asking questions and you have to digest like 20 cars and what's happening during every practice session and what tires they took when. And oh my God, my brain was in full meltdown mode. I was like, when I saw you was the first week off. That's why when I was there, I was like, I don't really care because it was my first week off.
Got it. And so have we gone into the areas that you're uncomfortable yet? You said you like to be uncomfortable.
I like to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Have we hit on any of the topics that make you uncomfortable?
Oh yeah, relationships always make me a little uncomfortable.
Got it.
Because it's such an area that I always feel like everybody has the one thing. I don't know what you think about this. Like, some people have a problem with money.
Okay.
Some people have a problem with their family. Some people have a problem with confidence. Some people have a problem with the relationships. Like, everybody has their thing.
It's the karma that we were talking about.
Maybe, yeah, exactly, right? The one thing that you're going to get over and over again in your spiral. And so that one for me is relationships, right? Like, even friendships are fine. I can let go of a friendship, no problem. If I never talk to you again, I'm okay. But like, a relationship is so my area. And I see other people having successful relationships and disasters in other ways, and I'm just like, how? How'd you find someone? How'd that all work out? Like, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. If I knew, I'd answer it.
Interesting.
Probably because I didn't practice at it, maybe. I don't know. I got married really young. I was married when I was 23. And then I got divorced at 30. And then I've had long-term relationships. Maybe I just didn't like date enough. I don't know. Or maybe it was just because of my programming, like with my dad and mom and the way that I handled things, maybe. Maybe it's because between that and my need, growth. I think it's because I always want to grow. And I think it's very hard to always grow with someone, right? And I think that we have an idea that relationships are supposed to be permanent. And maybe really none of them are. Maybe. Or maybe very few, right? Like, there's more exceptions to the rule than anything. Maybe it's not the norm. And that when I say, one of the things I feel like I've had to forgive myself for is growth, because it means I'm not resonating with someone anymore. And I still have to keep choosing me. So I feel like growth is probably one of the things.
I used to describe relationships through the lens of something called the slinky effect. And so you have two ends of the slinkies, right? We're in relationship, we have two ends of the slinky. One person has some growth and now has created tension in the relationship.
Totally.
And so this person over here gets to choose now. Because if they choose, and because that tension can create fear, and if it creates fear, generally what happens, again, the way that the physiology works, it's like, I'm buttoning down the hatchets, I'm circling the wagons, I'm staying how I am, and I'm trying to hold this person, and they become a ball and chain. Or this person continues to grow until eventually it snaps and there is no relationship left.
Yeah.
But what happens is when we feel that tension of growth in relationship and we can see my partner is growing, I get to, again, face off with that fear and say, I'm going to choose to allow myself to be pulled forward by this other person's growth. And what I've found is it's like a slinky where it's not just pulled forward to meet again, it's pulled forward and then it goes past where, oh, I'm learning this thing about my childhood and about conscious relating and how we can blah, blah. And that person goes, okay, I'm being pulled forward. And now suddenly my interests take me in this direction on this path. And then they're the front end, creating that tension. And I think that when we can see, again, awareness gives us choice. One of the biggest problems that people have in relationship is they can't see the energetics of what's actually happening. If you could say to your partner, hey, I feel like I've been growing in this particular direction and it's creating tension. I can feel the part of me that's pulling on you because I want you. I'm afraid that we are going to wind up in different places. And so I can feel the pressure I'm putting on you without even realizing it of wanting to pull you. But I know that has to be a choice. And I'm curious if we can talk about whether you feel that and whether you want to make that choice. Like, where are we at with that?
Yeah.
Having the awareness opens up the conversation and you won't fix anything or be able to navigate the type of relationship that you're talking about without really clear, honest communication.
Communication, so important. It when we were talking about earlier, sort of like the core wounds of the masculine and feminine, and the feminine being afraid they're too much. Like, part of me, it's not necessarily too much. It's that there's the fear that there isn't someone that can handle it.
Because you're too much
Yeah.
for that person.
Yeah, like,
Right.
does this person exist? Can this person handle it? Like, I'm a lot, but a lot of really good things too, and challenging, of course.
Yeah,
You know?
and as a man, I have to be so grounded in who I am and my confidence to literally sit in the truth of me while you go into chaos and basically say, hey, I'm here. I see what's happening right now. I'm here. And I'm willing to be in this conversation with you. But here are the boundaries around this right now. One of the ones that I had, for example, was, hey, I can be in whatever, I understand why you're upset. And so I'm willing to be in the conversation with you. However, I am not willing to have you tell me that I'm out of integrity, that I'm this, that I'm that. I know who I am. My boundary is that I'm going to continue to stand in the truth of who I am, that I know you know me to be. And so as long as we're meeting there, let's have the conversation about why you're upset. Let's let you be upset. As long as you being upset doesn't mean I'm less than or whatever. That type of communication, I think, is really, really important. And most people have never been exposed to it. My parents didn't show me that. I didn't
Therapy
learn that
was
from
like
them.
for people that were really, really weird and crazy and psychopathic, you know?
But you also can only learn those in relationship.
Right.
There's certain
catch,
things that
right?
you can only learn in relationship. Absolutely.
true.
There's things you will only learn by yourself and other things you'll only learn in relationship.
That's so true. What are the best ways for people to learn about it? I think we could kind of wrap it up here with some calls to action, and then I'd love for you to do a poem if you're willing.
Yeah, sure. The best ways for people to learn about relationships.
And you have
is
a
in
breakup
general.
course too, right?
I do have a
Again,
breakup
we
course.
totally didn't hit on like a giant topic of yours. So
Yeah.
part two. But
yeah.
you know, you have a course as well.
Yeah, The Art of Breaking Up is a course that I have that people can find on my website, adamroa.com. And it really is, so just briefly touching on this, if people are going through a breakup, I think it's important for them to understand so many people go through a breakup and then they're looking at how do I move on? How do I heal? How do I whatever? Again, what are the energetics at play? You are still attached to this person that you were dating initially after a breakup. There's still an attachment there. And the reason is because you haven't yet grown. You haven't expanded. So of course, your consciousness is still attracted to the person you were with. Now, as you learn, as you grow, as you heal, as you do that work, your consciousness, the amount of patterns that you see, what you want, all of that stuff starts to shift. And now you, in your new place, would never actually date that person who couldn't meet you in what you want.
Totally.
And people always worry, well, what if I want to get back together? Well, the new version of you has to meet the new version of them.
Right.
And then there's an opportunity. But how you move on is by doing that growth so that you actually wouldn't even be attracted to that version. You wouldn't even be a match anymore. And naturally, suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I can let that go. And so the process of releasing, like keeping the lessons, but releasing the baggage and the hurt and all of that is, I had to learn through several breakups, one after 10 years and just craziness that I went through. Breakups have been a huge part of my journey. And I put it all into a 10-week course just to help people get to that point. Yeah. So
I would have bought that years ago when I was brokenhearted. I promise. I wish I'd known. How long's it been out?
I honestly don't even know. A year?
Yeah. Then it didn't exist.
It didn't exist. It didn't exist.
It was still in the void.
Yeah. And so I think that I encourage people. Everything that I'm saying is my opinion from my experiences. Right? Again, my beliefs have formed from actual experiences, and I can tell, if you can't tell, I'm nonstop on the growth path in terms of medicines and trips and all the things. And so, but it's still just an opinion, and I encourage people to explore an experience of what we talked about. So, hey, you're in a romantic partnership, you're getting triggered, great. Can you take that breath? Just that. If you listen to this entire thing and all you took was the next time I'm feeling triggered by my partner, let me just take a deep breath. The fact that you're able to catch that, create that space, I promise, is a starting point for everything else to unfold. And then stop following so many people. This is a big one.
What do you mean by that?
All the people listening, right? Like there's this hoarding of information that people do that I don't think allows for the depth of application. And so find the people you really resonate with and go deep into their podcasts, their books, their work, their courses, their coach with them, hire them, join their programs, whatever, rather than thinking that if you follow 1,000 coaches and gurus and influencers that you're receiving it at a deeper level. It stays very surface until you actually start applying it. And I think that we live in a society where I see people, oh, I saw 15 spiritual memes, so I feel more like evolved.
I've got it. I think I've got it.
Totally. And so actually putting it into practice is really big for people. And I think if you're listening to this and I don't know how long we've been talking, but if they're still here with us, then hopefully there's something here that they can apply to their lives for sure.
And I think there could be a disclaimer too, even for plant medicine, as we talked about it a fair amount, is I always say for people, like, it has to call you, you know? Like, and if you're listening and if you listen through that and you are still listening, it probably could be something that is either on your radar or gonna be on your radar. But I always say that because it's life-changing. It's always life-changing in some way.
It's changed mine for sure.
Yeah. In beautiful ways though. I mean, it's saying yes to growth. In my opinion, when you're doing it, when you say yes to it, you're saying yes to growth, which is hard. Period. That's why you have to say yes.
Yeah,
because you're saying yes to the difficult.
You are signing up for an ego death.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's a part of you, if you want something you never had, you got to do something you never done, right? And so there's a part of you that has to fall away for a new part of you to emerge, like a snake shedding its skin. And that process can be very challenging. The number of clients I've worked with who hire me for a vision of something, and then in the exploration, suddenly they're telling me they haven't been happy in their marriage for 10 years, or they hate their job that they've actually been doing. And I'm going, well, that wasn't even something you felt safe to say. And now, if you're calling in this version of your life that's so fulfilling and exciting, like you have that feeling, does that version of your life include being in an unhappy marriage?
Well, this goes to integrity, right? And when you're in integrity, the glass isn't broken anymore and you can hold more, right?
Yeah. And so that part of the journey of being radically self-honest, if there's another prescription I can give to people, is just because you admit you're not happy in your marriage doesn't mean you have to leave it.
True.
Just because you say you don't like your job doesn't mean you have to quit. But you can't actually take any action in the direction of transforming your life if you're not willing to admit, I'm not happy in my marriage or my job or whatever. So being radically self-honest, and this is hard even for me at times, where I'm sitting there going, I don't want to admit that this relationship I'm in is not the one, because I want this vision so much that the part of me that's admitting that this doesn't feel right is letting go of a dream of whatever. And it's so hard. And so, but that radical self-honesty, which all the way down to when I pull a snack out of the cupboard and going, ooh, my body doesn't actually want, like, this doesn't feel like the thing to do. And I get to be radically honest that there's a part of me that says, don't eat that right now. and put it back. Like how those little moments of integrity that no one else will ever know about. Those are the moments that only God sees. And if you want to be gifted the life that you are calling in, you need to prove yourself capable of holding the integrity necessary to create it.
Yeah, amen. So good. What poem do you think is sort of like hitting you right now in your intuition for what is right for the moment?
There's one of two.
Okay.
Either the one that we've talked about, we've mentioned on it that you heard after
I'm tempted to say that one, but what's the other one?
The other one is called Heaven, and it's really about the first line is the most impactful thing you can do for the world is learn how to love life, and so I can go either way. Let's let you pick.
I kind of want to do the love one because the other one is so famous and people can go look that up and it's been viewed over 200 million times or more. It's like the most famous. I'd love to hear another one.
Heaven.
Live.
Okay.
Heaven.
I actually did this in the third pyramid in the chamber of the third one, which you weren't there.
I totally wussed out. I was so
What happened?
tired. I was just so tired. Like,
oh man.
I don't sing and I don't dance and I don't do I don't like my meditation. While I said I didn't do much, like I talked to like 4 ascended masters within the course of like 10 minutes and got a really great answer from every one of them. And I was like, all right, and then that's done. But that was 10 minutes of 4 hours. And I was like, I was bored, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. So I was like so tired and I could not imagine continuing on for more hours. And I was just like, just couldn't do it.
For me, I was just, it was a wild show for me. I just went looking at everyone slit their like spiritual freak flag fly.
Oh,
I went,
man.
This is full on. And it was a scene.
But then I kind of felt bad that I was judging it. I'm like, that's weird, which I'm not judging, but I was like, and then I judged myself sometimes like, I wish I could sing. Or
yeah, it was, and I sat in a lot of that, especially coming straight out of Iboga, just going, wow, I'm definitely judging. This is making me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't, this is not how I want to do this right now. And having those moments and going, actually just let me receive. So
I mean, I'm proud of myself for doing less because my problem is doing too much normally. So it's actually a decent practice for me, but I kind of can't believe I didn't go in all 3 of the pyramids. That was just, hey, whatever.
Yeah, it happened.
Line it up again some other time.
Yeah, so I can do that poem and it's called Heaven.
Okay, great.
Do me a favor, take a nice deep inhale. The most impactful thing you can do for the world is learn how to love life. All of life. Show people that being happy doesn't mean turning a blind eye to the pain and the sadness and the suffering that happens here. Show them that choosing love doesn't mean ignoring fear, it just means being willing to feel. And those brave souls will always heal as long as they maintain the courage to feel. Because the fear of feeling is really at the root of every fear, which creates a fear of living because feeling's why you're here. So you can fight the fact that feelings past have felt so freaking hard, but it's the very fact that you have felt all that feels like the part we should celebrate, investigate, learn to navigate with ease. Your emotions are the gift God gives you every time you breathe. Energy in motion with the strength to bring a king down to his knees, and yet contained within emotion is the key to set you free. Yes, contained within emotion is the gift of what being human is, a chance to feel all of life from deep sorrow to deep bliss. And you might wish the two would split, but the twist is that they'll always coexist because even the heartbreak you hate today had the way paved by a lover's kiss. And so you can write your list of how life's a bitch, but don't forget the asterisk because for all the times you went through shit, it fertilized a lot of gifts. But if you only focus on what you lack, you can't appreciate what you've got. But with gratitude for what you have, you can see that it's a lot. And that is the difference between abundance and scarcity. It's not about what you have, it's about what you see. So the next time you forget how blessed you be, take a moment and focus on the next breath you breathe. The next time you forget how blessed you be, take a moment and focus on the next breath you breathe. And notice you're right here with me. A miracle, a great mystery, out of hundreds of trillions of stars and hundreds of billions of galaxies, somehow, some way, you're here today with me and we all breathe on a spinning sphere of chemicals, spiraling through the universe. You were once one of 200 million sperm, you just happened to get there first. So how could you ever say you're cursed? You've been blessed since before your birth, and you might not think you have it best, but it could definitely be worse. And if you don't believe that yet, go tell the deaf what you just heard. And if you don't like what you see, go tell the blind how much it hurts. On your hardest day, when you really want to walk away, go tell the paraplegic how it's unfair. Share how you want to run from all your problems while he's pushed everywhere in a chair. And I'm not saying that life is fair or that it's easy. We all go through a lot. But as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, don't lose gratitude for the fact that you walk. Celebrate the fact that you can dance and sing. Embrace the abundance in the very act when you talk. Because when you can spot abundance in the simplest things, that's when more abundance unlocks. The simplest things. Taste and touch and breath and smell. Did you know there are people with something called anosmia, which means their sense of smell is completely lost. So while they literally can't smell the roses, do you want to complain you don't have the time to stop? Because this life is the only one that you've got. And there are people who would trade places with you without a second thought. So no matter how many tears, heartbreaks, or bad days you pay, the cemetery is full of souls that know living is worth the cost. Don't wait till it's too late to learn that lesson. Living is worth the cost. But make no mistake, being alive is not the same thing as living. Just like throwing something away is not the same thing as giving. So if you haven't yet found your love of life, I suggest you keep on digging and allow yourself to feel your way through all the hurt and all the rage. And as you feel, allow yourself to finally turn the page. That's how we heal. And it might hurt like hell, but you'll have shown us we'll be okay to feel it all and still love life. That's heaven. And you'll have helped pave the way. That's heaven. Can you feel it? Heaven is here today.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I love that you said yes to this calling and this gift. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I love it. This is my favorite.
Oh my God, that's so great. And I think it was so pertinent to a lot of what we talked about, which is that emotion and the feeling and
that line, the fear of feeling is really at the root of every fear.
Exactly.
You know, it's just like, what are you scared to feel? If you can identify what that is, you can ask for help.
Yeah.
Right? And I think just being willing to feel it all is one of the most courageous things that we ever do as humans. It's all the way back to letting someone in. It's like, if I let you in at that level, what might I feel if you reject me, right?
Yeah. And what if we just looked at all the feelings less judgmental and think we're only supposed to feel the good ones, right? Feelings are it's just part of it.
Well said.
They're all from God. Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.